I can't really think of many kind of huge events where there was kind of a well-known prophecy of it happening. It happens all the time that people that, after something big happens, people go through things that, all the kind of psychics and astrologers and channels and different, people in that kind of space have been saying, and then you'll find kind of, oh yeah, that person did see it coming. But it's never like we're all expecting it and then it happens. And my sense is just that that's not really how the cosmos is supposed to work. And I was saying that in reference to this tsunami prediction, right? There was a Japanese psychic, comic book artist, manga artist, who wrote this comic book where she detailed some of the things she'd seen in dreams over the years, and did actually successfully predict the 2011 tsunami. She had that in her manga comic that was published a lot earlier. And people saw that afterwards and were like, wow, she really predicted that. And she has predicted another tsunami for July. In particular, I think it was 5th of July, but then I've also heard that she just said July 2025. And a lot of people were talking about that. So, I do try to kind of take note of what's being said by different people and what's swirling around the zeitgeist, and then kind of looking and seeing, is this possible? And I really, obviously, goes without saying, hopefully this prophecy doesn't happen, and I have this feeling that it's just not how the world is supposed to work. We're not all supposed to kind of know that something's coming and then it comes. It also brings to mind this idea, which I heard once, that there's supposed to be a curse on astrologers. And the curse on astrologers is they are never supposed to be able to get everything right. There's this curse put on us so that no matter how well we work or how rigorous we do our calculations and study patterns and so forth, we have to get things wrong sometimes. And that's how the cosmos is supposed to work. We're not supposed to know what's coming. It's kind of inherent in the nature of being in this reality, I think. We can have a sense, though, and we can have an idea of the shape of things, but to know exactly what's coming is not our lot.
I also found your take on what's coming in terms of, because we've been talking about information, like a lot of Gemini, things are shifting. And yeah, there seems to be, well, in general, like yourself and other astrologers referring to more and more like contact becoming a bit of a thing and I know it's been one of your fascinations for the longest times. And maybe I should just give you some space to talk about it, because I find your approach really really interesting to what you believe is happening.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my pet obsessions. And the reason for that, the whole reason why I talk a lot about the UFO phenomenon, is that I've done this study of cycles, which really does seem to tell us that actually this phenomenon is going to grow in consciousness. I almost said, that UFO disclosure is coming, but I held back because I don't really want to. I don't want to focus too much on the idea of UFO disclosure, which seems to imply that kind of governments are going to, or the president of the US is going to stand on a podium and say, yes, there are aliens, and yes, we're dealing with them. I'm not sure that that's how things are going to happen, but somehow this phenomenon does seem likely to be rising in consciousness a lot. In other words, that we may be kind of somehow coming into contact with other entities, let's say. Now, why am I saying this? A lot of the cycles that I've been studying, if you look at their seed points, if you look at their conjunctional periods, you see this phenomenon kind of making its mark in these seed moments. For example, I was talking about this Pluto-Neptune cycle, and if you go back to the 1890s, something that a lot of people who've studied the UFO phenomenon will know about is the massive wave of sightings of mystery airships. 1896 and 1897 in the US, there were hundreds of sightings of strange airships, people landing in these airships. And there are hundreds of newspaper reports of these things. This isn't some kind of urban myth or fantasy. You can you can see literally hundreds of local newspaper articles about sightings of the mystery airships. It's never really been figured out what these things were or who was driving them. But they came before airships were really a thing. They weren't balloons, and they were able to move quite quickly. And this is a kind of what this is from a sort of astrologer's perspective, is this is a kind of foreshadowing of the UFO phenomenon, right? We get it at the seed point of this cycle in the 1890s when Pluto and Neptune are conjunct. And and it seems to be suggesting that we're going to be seeing strange things in the sky, strange machines, maybe. There's a foreshadowing of contact there. Now, what happens when Pluto and Neptune move into orb of this long sextile I've been talking about? Well, it happens in the 1940s. This is exactly when the UFO phenomenon makes its mark on the world, when we start to see the Foo Fighters during the Second World War, when there were the flying saucer waves in the US, Kenneth Arnold, all this kind of stuff, the Roswell incident, right, 1947. So we can see that this something is promised at the conjunction, and then when the two planets reach their first major aspect, which is the time when you'd expect to see manifestations of what was promised, the UFO phenomenon appears. And so, again, we find ourselves at the end of this kind of long sextile now, and it just seems to me that we're going to see some major upsurge in this story, whether it's a lot more sightings, or kind of maybe some sort of mass sighting potentially, or perhaps more information leaking out of secret programs and so forth. We're already seeing that. We're already seeing it right now. And then there's another cycle that also kind of clues us into this potentially happening, which is the Uranus-Neptune synodic cycle. So Uranus-Neptune are currently in a sextile. They're part of this minor grand trine that we've been talking about, this configuration of the outer planets. They conjoined in 1993. So if you look at what was going on around that time, you can understand what's promised by their synodic cycle. And there were a lot of things happening then. Okay, we had the World Wide Web, of course, emerging at that time. But there were some weirder things as well. And one of them was the Disclosure Project by the UFO researcher Stephen Greer. He launched this Disclosure Project in 1993 at the time of those planets being conjoined. I'm almost certain he probably knew nothing about that. But yet he launches his Disclosure Project there at that time. And he has all these whistleblowers coming out, kind of basically saying, look, we've worked on these programs, or we've seen these craft, or this thing is real. That comes at the seed point of this cycle. And now we're reaching another major moment, a major aspect in Uranus and Neptune. So we can expect, again, this is more confirmation that we're going to see much more on this issue. You can kind of feel it sort of bubbling under the surface. We've had these whistleblowers emerging. And in fact, it's 2017 when this kind of process of sort of disclosure kind of started. There was an article that was published in the New York Times on sources. There was a kind of whistleblower, Luis Elizondo, kind of emerging, saying he'd worked on a program to catalog these kind of happenings. And this is maybe getting a bit technical, but in 2017, Pluto had actually moved to the degree at which Uranus and Neptune began this cycle. So that's another kind of trigger. Like if a planet moves to a kind of conjunctional degree, it's almost like the zodiac has a memory, and it will kind of bring forth what that cycle promised. So 2017, we have this kind of beginning of this sort of process of disclosure. This was also when Oumuamua, I don't know if you remember hearing about this kind of interstellar object that kind of entered the solar system. And it kind of, it was named after this, I think it's a Hawaiian deity, Oumuamua. And it was the first interstellar object that we'd catalogued coming into the solar system. That also happened at that time, 2017. And it's kind of cluing us into, I think, to much more understanding of our place in the cosmos, being something that's promised by this ongoing Uranus-Neptune cycle, as well as the longer cycle. So there are all these kind of different data points that you can kind of put together. And it doesn't really matter what you kind of personally believe about UFOs. You can see that that topic is exploding into consciousness in the coming years. I think it's almost certain.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely love this, well then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.